I visited my parents' house for the first time in a year. There were 23 framed photos on the living room wall. My brother's wedding, my sister's graduation, family vacations. I wasn't in a single one. Mom saw me looking and changed the subject. I left before dinner. My name's Leo. I'm 29 years old, and I work as a structural engineer for a mid-sized firm out in Denver. I've got a decent apartment, a cat named Biscuit who judges me constantly, and a girlfriend named Jolene who is way too good for me and reminds me of that at least once a week. Life is pretty solid right now, but I need to tell you about something that happened a few months ago because it's been eating at me, and honestly I think some of you might relate to this more than I'd like. So let me give you the background. I grew up in a suburb outside of Portland, Oregon. Nice house, 2-car garage, the whole thing. My parents are Hank and Diane. My dad's a retired contractor. My mom's a former school administrator. I've got an older brother, Sullivan, who's 33, and a younger sister, Waverly, who's 25. Sully's a dentist. Waverly just finished her master's in education. They're both doing well, and I'm genuinely happy for them. I need you to understand that, because this story isn't about jealousy. This is about something else entirely. Growing up, I was the middle kid, and I know what you're thinking. Here we go, another middle child sob story. But hear me out, because this goes beyond not getting enough attention at the dinner table. I was the quiet one. Sully was the firstborn golden boy who played varsity baseball and got a scholarship. Waverly was the baby of the family, sweet and bubbly, the one who could do no wrong. And I was just Leo. I got decent grades, not great. I played guitar in my room. I liked building things with my hands, which my dad should have appreciated considering his career, but he never really seemed to notice. I wasn't a problem child, but I also wasn't a highlight reel, and in my family, if you weren't a highlight, you were wallpaper. The thing is, it wasn't dramatic. Nobody ever sat me down and said you don't matter to us. It was subtle. It was my mom going to every single one of Sully's games, but forgetting I had a band concert. It was my dad teaching Sully to drive in his truck on a Saturday morning and then telling me to just sign up for driver's ed when it was my turn. It was Waverly getting a surprise birthday party for her 16th while I got a card and a gift card to Target for mine. Each thing on its own was small enough that if I ever brought it up, I'd look petty. And I knew that. So I never said anything. When I left for college, I went to Colorado State. Nobody in my family helped me move in. My mom said she had a work thing. My dad said the drive was too long. Sully was doing his dental residency, and Waverly was in high school. I loaded up my Honda Civic by myself and drove 11 hours to Fort Collins with a duffel bag and a microwave I bought at Goodwill. I remember sitting in my dorm room that first night thinking this is fine. I've always been fine on my own. And I meant it. I wasn't bitter. I was just used to it. College was actually great for me. I found my people. I found engineering, which turned out to be the thing I was born to do. I met Jolene junior year. She's from a big loud family in Texas where everybody hugs too hard and talks too loud and nobody ever forgets a birthday. Being around her family was like stepping into a warm house after walking through snow. I didn't realize how cold I'd been until I felt what warm looked like. I graduated, got a job in Denver, and started building a life. I'd call home every couple of weeks. The calls were fine, but empty. My mom would talk about Sully's practice or Waverly's school. My dad would say something about the weather. Nobody ever asked me much about my life. If I volunteered information, like hey I got promoted, or Jolene and I just moved into a new place, I'd get a that's nice or a good for you, and then we'd circle back to whatever Sully or Waverly was doing. I started spacing the calls out. Every 2 weeks became once a month. Once a month became every 6 weeks. Nobody noticed. Here's where it gets real. About a year ago, Sully got married. Beautiful wedding up in Bend, Oregon. I was invited, obviously, but I wasn't in the wedding party. Sully had 4 groomsmen. His college roommate, 2 friends from dental school, and our cousin Declan. Not me, his brother. When I asked him about it, casually, not making a big deal, he said he didn't think I'd want to be up there because I'm not really a spotlight kind of guy. Which technically wasn't wrong, but it still stung. I went to the wedding. I sat at a table near the back with some of my parents' friends. Jolene held my hand under the table the whole time because she could tell I was doing that thing where I pretend I'm fine, but my jaw is clenched so tight I could crack a walnut. After the wedding, I kind of pulled back even more. I didn't make a dramatic announcement. I didn't send a letter or have a blowout fight. I just quietly stopped reaching out. And here's the part that confirmed everything I already suspected. Nobody reached out to me either. For almost a full year, I didn't hear from my parents unless it was a mass family text about a holiday or someone forwarding a recipe. My mom didn't call on my birthday. She texted "Happy birthday, sweetie" with a cake emoji at 9:47 at night, which means she saw it on Facebook and scrambled. So a few months ago, Jolene convinced me to go visit. She said maybe I was being too hard on them. Maybe they missed me and just didn't know how to show it. She's an optimist, that woman. She sees the good in people even when the good requires a magnifying glass and a prayer. I love her for it. So I agreed. We drove up to Portland on a Friday, got there Saturday morning, and walked into my parents' house for the first time in over a year. The house looked the same, smelled the same. My mom had made her usual brunch spread, eggs, bacon, those little cinnamon rolls from a can that she's been making since we were kids. Sully was there with his wife Colette. Waverly was there with her boyfriend, some guy named Bridger who wore a vest indoors and talked about cryptocurrency. Everyone hugged me. It felt warm for about 30 seconds. Then I walked into the living room, and everything changed. There was a gallery wall. You know the type, those big arrangements of framed photos in different sizes, all coordinated, clearly put together with intention. There were 23 frames. I counted them. Sully and Colette's wedding, multiple shots. Waverly's graduation, cap and gown, holding her diploma, hugging my mom. Family vacations I vaguely remembered from when we were younger, except the shots chosen were all ones where I must have been somewhere else or just out of frame. There was a photo of my dad and Sully fishing, my mom and Waverly at some vineyard, a candid of the whole family at Christmas from maybe 2 years ago, and I wasn't in it because I hadn't come home that year. 23 photos. I was not in a single one. I stood there staring at that wall like it was a museum exhibit about a family I didn't belong to. And my mom walked up behind me, saw me looking, and said, "Oh, I need to update that wall one of these days. It's such a mess." Then she changed the subject and asked if I wanted more coffee. Just like that. Like the wall wasn't a perfect visual representation of exactly where I stood in this family. Like it was just decor. I looked at Jolene. She looked at me, and I could see it in her eyes. She finally got it. I told my mom I wasn't feeling well. I said we needed to head out. We left before dinner. My mom looked confused. My dad barely looked up from the football game. Sully said drive safe. Bro Waverly was on her phone. I didn't say a word the entire drive back to the hotel. Jolene didn't push. She just held my hand on the center console while I stared out the windshield and tried to figure out how you grieve something you never really had. We stayed in Portland that night because Jolene had booked the hotel for the whole weekend. She thought we'd be spending time with my family. Instead, we ordered room service and watched a nature documentary about octopuses while I pretended I wasn't replaying that gallery wall in my head on a loop. Jolene finally said something around midnight. She said, "Leo, I owe you an apology. I thought maybe you were exaggerating. I thought maybe it was just middle child stuff and you were reading too much into it. But that wall, that's not subtle. That's a choice." She was right. That wall was curated. Someone, my mom probably, picked each of those 23 photos deliberately. She arranged them. She hung them. She looked at that collection and thought, yes, this represents our family. And in that representation, I didn't exist. That's not an oversight. That's a statement. But here's the thing. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't send a text. I went back to Denver and went back to my life. I figured I'd already been living without them for a year, so what was different now? The difference, I guess, was that now I knew for sure. Before, I could tell myself stories. They're busy. They don't mean anything by it. They love me, they just don't show it well. But you can't tell yourself stories when the evidence is literally framed and mounted on a wall in the living room. About 3 weeks after the visit, my mom called me. Not to talk about the wall or ask why I left early. She called because Waverly was having a birthday party, her 26th, and they wanted to do it big because she'd just been offered a teaching position at some school in Eugene. My mom was going on and on about the venue and the catering and how they were flying in Waverly's college friends. She asked if I could come and also if I could chip in for the party fund. She said everyone's contributing. I asked how much. She said $1,000. Let me say that again. $1,000. For my sister's birthday party. The same sister whose existence had been celebrated annually with personalized cakes and surprise events for as long as I could remember. The same parents who gave me a Target gift card. I said I'd think about it. My mom said, "Oh, come on, Leo, don't be difficult. Your sister would love to have you there." And something about the way she said it, like my attendance was a courtesy and my money was the actual ask, just hit me sideways. I told her I wasn't being difficult. I just needed to check my finances. She said okay fine, but let me know soon because the caterer needs a head count. I didn't call back. A week later, Sully texted me. He said, "Hey man, Mom mentioned you haven't committed to Waverly's party. You coming or not?" I told him I wasn't sure I could make it. He sent back a thumbs down emoji, and then nothing. That was the full extent of my brother's attempt to connect with me. Then Waverly herself called. And this is the part that really broke something in me, because up until this point, I didn't have any real beef with Waverly. She was the youngest. She didn't choose to be the favorite. But what she said on that call changed how I saw her. She said, "Leo, Mom told me you're being weird about my party." She said it just like that. Weird. Like wanting to not spend $1,000 on a party for someone who hasn't called me in 8 months with some kind of character defect. I took a breath and said, "Waverly, I'm not being weird. I just can't commit right now." And she said, "Well, it would be nice if for once you could show up for this family instead of always making everything about you. I want you to sit with that for a second." My sister, who I had supported, encouraged, congratulated at every milestone, who I had never once asked anything of, told me I was making everything about myself. Me, the guy who wasn't in a single photo on the family wall, the guy who wasn't in his own brother's wedding party, the guy whose birthday gets a Facebook afterthought. I was the selfish one. I said, "Waverly, when is my birthday?" There was silence, a long silence. Then she said, "It's in the fall, right? October maybe? My birthday is in August." She didn't even know the month. I said, "It's August 14th. She said, "Okay, well, I'm not good with dates. You know that." And I said, "Yeah, I do know that. I know that about all of you." Then I hung up. Jolene was sitting on the couch when I put the phone down. She didn't ask what happened because she'd heard the whole thing. She just opened her arms and I sat down next to her and put my head on her shoulder, and for the first time in maybe a decade, I let myself actually feel it. Not just the wall, not just the party, all of it. Every missed concert, every forgotten birthday, every conversation where I was talked over or skipped, every holiday where I sat in the corner and watched my family love each other in ways they never loved me. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but I couldn't. It's like the sadness was so old it had calcified into something solid sitting in my chest like a stone. Jolene rubbed my back and said, "You don't owe them anything, Leo. You never did." After that night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to Waverly's party. I wasn't going to send money. And I wasn't going to explain myself. I was done performing the role of family member in a family that had never bothered to cast me in the first place. I didn't block anyone. I didn't send a dramatic text. I just stopped. Stopped calling. Stopped responding to group texts. Stopped checking in. And once again, just like before, nobody noticed. Waverly's party happened without me. I saw the photos on Instagram. Big venue, lots of people, flower arrangements, a 3-tier cake. My parents were beaming. Sully gave a toast. There was a slideshow of Waverly's life, and I kid you not, I went through every single photo in that slideshow that someone posted as a reel, and I was in exactly 2 of them. Both were group shots where I was partially blocked by someone else. I could have been anyone. I could have been a stranger who wandered into the frame. That was the night I unfollowed all of them. Not unfriended, just unfollowed. I didn't need to see it anymore. I already knew the story. I'd been reading it my whole life. The next few weeks were rough. I threw myself into work, which wasn't hard because we had a big project, a mixed-use development downtown that was eating up all my hours. But at night, when things got quiet, the memories would creep back in. Being 8 years old watching my dad throw a ball with Sully in the backyard while I sat on the porch with a book. Being 16 at my own birthday dinner while my mom took a 20-minute phone call from Waverly's dance teacher. My college graduation, which my parents attended but left early because they had a dinner reservation. Jolene kept saying maybe I should talk to someone, a therapist, and I kept saying I was fine. I wasn't fine. I was functional, which is different. Functional means you go to work and eat meals and answer your emails. Fine means you're actually okay. I was not okay. I was just very good at pretending. One night Jolene sat me down and said, "Leo, I love you, but you have been walking around this apartment like a ghost for 3 weeks. You barely talk. You haven't played your guitar once. You went to bed at 8:30 last night. This isn't you. Please talk to someone." So I did. I found a therapist named Dr. Adler, a calm guy in his 50s who wore cardigans and had the most aggressively soothing voice I've ever heard. And in our very first session, after I told him the whole story, he said something that cracked me open. He said, "Leo, You're not grieving the loss of your family. You're grieving the fact that the family you wanted never existed. The one you keep hoping for. The one where they notice you and value you and make room for you. That family was always a fantasy. What you actually had was something else. And until you stop mourning the fantasy, you can't start dealing with the reality. I sat in his office and stared at the ceiling and thought about that for a long time. He was right. I had spent my entire life auditioning for a role in a family that never had a part for me. And every time I didn't get cast, I told myself next time. Next time they'll see me. Next time they'll remember. Next time I'll matter. But next time never came. It just kept not coming, over and over, until I was 29 years old and standing in front of a wall of photos wondering why I wasn't in any of them. Therapy didn't fix me overnight. Dr. Adler told me it wouldn't, and I appreciated the honesty. He said healing from something like this isn't like setting a broken bone where you put it in a cast and wait 6 weeks. It's more like learning to walk again after you've been limping for so long you forgot what a normal stride feels like. Some days I'd feel great, like I'd cracked the code and was ready to move forward. Other days I'd see a commercial where a dad hugs his son and I'd have to leave the room. But I kept going. Every Tuesday at 4 o'clock, I sat in that office and talked. About my childhood. About the patterns. About how I'd spent my whole life shrinking myself to fit into a space that was never built for me. Dr. Adler helped me understand that my family's neglect wasn't about me being unworthy. It was about them being incapable. My parents had built a dynamic early on, Sully the star, Waverly the sweetheart, and they never updated the script. I was the quiet middle kid who didn't demand attention, so they never gave it. Not because they were evil, because they were lazy, emotionally lazy. And at a certain point, my invisibility became so normal to them that they genuinely didn't see it anymore. My mom probably looked at that gallery wall every day and never once thought, Leo's not in any of these, because in her mental model of the family, I was already an afterthought. Understanding it didn't make it hurt less, but it made me stop blaming myself, and that was the first domino. The second domino was work. Around this time, my firm landed the biggest contract in its history. A tech company was building a new campus in the foothills west of Denver, and they wanted something architecturally ambitious. We're talking cantilevered structures, green roofs, a pedestrian bridge connecting 2 buildings over a ravine. It was the kind of project that makes engineers lose sleep for all the right reasons. My boss, a woman named Pernilla who was terrifyingly competent, pulled me into her office and said, "Leo, I want you to lead structural on this. The whole thing." I almost asked her if she had the right Leo. I threw everything I had into that project. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. I was sketching solutions at 2 in the morning. I was running load calculations in the shower. I called Jolene from the office one night to say I'd be late, and she said, "Leo, you sound happy." And I realized she was right. I was happy, not because I was running away from my family stuff, but because I was running towards something that was mine. Something I'd built with my own hands and my own brain that nobody could take credit for or overlook. The project took months, and during that time, I grew in ways I didn't expect. Pernilla started including me in client meetings, which were usually reserved for senior partners. I presented our structural design to the tech company's CEO, a guy named Rowan who wore sneakers with everything and asked questions that actually showed he understood engineering. After the presentation, he shook my hand and said, "This is the most elegant solution I've seen for a site like this." Pernilla told me afterward that the client had specifically requested I stay on through construction. That had never happened before for someone at my level. Meanwhile, Jolene and I were getting stronger. There's something about going through hard things with someone that either breaks you or welds you together, and we got welded. She started coming to some of my therapy sessions, not because we needed couples counseling, but because she wanted to understand what I was dealing with so she could support me better. Dr. Adler said she was one of the most emotionally intelligent partners he'd seen, and Jolene said, "Well, obviously," which made all 3 of us laugh. I also reconnected with some old friends. My college buddy Emmett, who worked in sustainable architecture in Seattle, came down for a weekend, and we spent 3 days hiking, eating terrible food truck tacos, and talking about everything. I told him about my family. He told me about his divorce, which I didn't even know had happened because I'd been so wrapped up in my own spiral. We made a pact to actually stay in touch, and unlike most pacts like that, we kept it. We started doing a monthly video call that sometimes included Jolene and Emmett's new girlfriend. a ceramicist named Sloane who had the driest humor of anyone I'd ever met. She once described a vase she made as looking like it was having an existential crisis, and I knew she was good people. During all of this, my family was doing what my family always does, existing without me. I hadn't heard from any of them in almost 4 months. No calls, no texts, not even a group message. It was like I had moved to another planet and nobody checked the forwarding address. Part of me ached over it. The little kid in me who just wanted his mom to hang his drawing on the fridge. But the grown man part of me, the part that was leading a major project and going to therapy and building a life worth living, that part understood that their silence was not a reflection of my value. It was a reflection of theirs. Around the 5-month mark, something happened. Jolene's mom, a force of nature named Rosalind who hugged like she was trying to fuse your molecules together, invited me to her annual 4th of July barbecue. I'd been before, but this time was different. This time, Rosalind had made me a name tag that said Leo, Honorary Gutierrez. She introduced me to her neighbors as my daughter's partner, the brilliant engineer, which made me want to crawl under the table, but also kind of made my whole year. Her dad, Big Frank, spent an hour asking me about the campus project and actually listening to my answers. Jolene's brother Mateo challenged me to horseshoes and trash-talked me with such affection that I almost got emotional over a lawn game. This is what family is supposed to feel like, I thought. Not perfect, not without friction, but present, attentive, like everyone in the room actually wanted to be there and wanted you there too. I went home that night and sat on the balcony with biscuit in my lap. Jolene brought me a beer and sat next to me. I said, your family makes me feel more seen in one afternoon than mine has in 29 years. She said, that's because you are seen, Leo. You always were, just not by the right people. A few weeks later, Pernilla called me into her office again. She said the firm was creating a new senior associate position, essentially a step below partner, and she wanted to put me up for it. She said my work on the campus project had been exceptional and that several clients had mentioned me by name. The promotion would come with a significant raise, a larger team, and my name on projects. I said yes before she finished the sentence. I got the promotion. I celebrated with Jolene, Emmett, and Sloane over a video call, and Big Frank, who sent me a bottle of whiskey with a note that said, proud of you, kid. I thought about calling my parents. Old habits. The impulse was there for about 10 seconds before it faded. They wouldn't understand why it mattered. They'd say congratulations in that flat way they always did, and then tell me about something Sully or Waverly was doing. I didn't need that. I didn't want that. What I wanted was exactly what I had. People who actually cared. A career that was thriving. A therapist who was helping me untangle 30 years of emotional neglect. A cat who, despite all evidence, I'm pretty sure loved me. And a partner who looked at me like I was somebody worth looking at. I was doing more than surviving. I was growing. And the people who should have been there to see it had made their choice a long time ago. I was finally making mine. 7 months of silence. That's how long it took before my family finally noticed I was gone. And honestly, the only reason they noticed was because they needed something. It was a Tuesday. I was at the office reviewing blueprints for a new phase of the campus project when my phone rang. It was my dad, who had not called me personally in well over a year, who communicated primarily through grunts and the occasional forwarded link about power tools. Hank was calling me. I almost didn't answer. I looked at the screen for a long time, watching his name pulse. Then I picked up, because apparently 29 years of conditioning doesn't evaporate just because you've been going to therapy. I said, hey, Dad. He said, hey, Leo, how you doing? Small talk. Weather. The Broncos. Then, after about 3 minutes of the conversational equivalent of a doctor warming up a stethoscope, he got to it. Your mother and I are thinking about selling the house. The market's good right now, and we want to downsize. He said it casually, like this was just information. But then came the next part. The thing is, we've been looking at the finances, and we're a little short on what we'd need to bridge the gap between selling this place and buying the condo your mother likes. Sully just bought into a new practice, so he's tapped out. And Waverly's still getting on her feet with the new job. I sat there in my office chair and waited. I knew where this was going, but I wanted him to say it. I wanted to hear the words come out of his mouth. There was a pause. Then he said, we were hoping you might be able to help us out. Maybe 30, 40,000. We'd pay you back. $30,000 to $40,000. From the son they forgot existed. From the kid who wasn't in a single photo on their wall. From the guy who didn't get a phone call on his birthday. They wanted 40 grand. I didn't explode. Dr. Adler would have been proud. I took a breath and said, Dad, that's a big ask. He said, I know, but you're doing well, right? Your mother says you got some kind of promotion. The way he said it, some kind of promotion, like it was vague and possibly imaginary. Like my career was a rumor he'd half heard. I told him I needed time to think about it. He said, sure, take your time, but the condo might go fast, so sooner would be better. I hung up and sat in my office for 20 minutes without moving. Then I called Jolene and told her everything. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said, Leo, please tell me you're not actually considering this. I said no, but I'm considering something else. That night, Jolene and I sat on the couch, and I laid out what I'd been thinking. Not revenge, not some calculated scheme, but something I'd been mulling over since Dr. Adler first said the word boundaries. I wanted to have a real conversation with my family. Not a phone call, not a text. A face-to-face, sit-down, no escape conversation where I finally said everything I'd been carrying. Not to hurt them, not to make them feel guilty, but to tell them the truth, clearly and calmly, so that whatever happened next happened with full information. Jolene said she was in. Whatever I needed, she was there. Then she said, have you talked to Dr. Adler about this? I said, not yet. She said, maybe start there. My next session, I told Dr. Adler about the phone call and my plan. He listened carefully and then said, I think this is important, Leo, but I want you to be prepared for something. You may say everything perfectly. You may be calm, clear, and compassionate, and they still might not hear you. Their inability to see you isn't a problem you can solve with the right speech. It's a pattern that's decades old. I said, I know, but I need to say it anyway. For me. He nodded and said, then let's make sure you're saying it for you, not for their reaction. We spent the next 2 sessions working through what I wanted to say, not scripting it word for word, because he said that would make me sound rehearsed and I'd lose my nerve if I deviated. Instead, we worked on the core truths, the things I needed to communicate no matter how the conversation went, the facts of my experience, the impact of their behavior, what I wanted going forward, and most importantly, what I was prepared to do if nothing changed. I also called Emmett because he's the most brutally honest person I know and I needed someone to pressure test me. I told him the whole plan and he said, Leo, I've got one question. What's your walk away? Like, if they sit there and deny everything or make you the bad guy, what do you do? I said, I walk away. He said, you sure? Because walking away from your family isn't like walking away from a bad date. It's the kind of thing that sits in your chest for years. I said, it's already sitting in my chest, Emmett. It's been there my whole life. At least this way it sits there on my terms. He paused and then said, all right, brother, then you do it. And if it goes sideways, Sloan and I will drive down and we'll eat terrible tacos, and you can be sad about it with people who actually give a crap about you. That's friendship right there. 2 weeks later, I called my mom. I said I wanted to come up for a visit. I said I wanted to talk to everyone, the whole family, together. She sounded surprised and then pleased in that surface-level way she had. She said, oh, that would be wonderful, Leo, we'd love that. She didn't ask what I wanted to talk about. She probably assumed I was coming to discuss the money. She started talking about what she'd make for dinner. I drove up on a Saturday morning. Jolene offered to come, but I told her I needed to do this part alone. She kissed me at the door and said, I'll be right here when you get back. Call me after. I'll have wine ready. I said, better make it whiskey. She said, that bad? I said, just prepared. The drive was 6 hours of me rehearsing and then unrehearsing and then just listening to music and trying not to overthink it. I pulled into the driveway at around 2 in the afternoon. The house looked the same as always. The garden was overgrown because my dad had been saying he'd fix it for 3 years. The paint on the mailbox was peeling. Everything about the exterior said comfortable stagnation. People who had stopped trying because they thought everything was fine. I walked inside and they were all there. Mom in the kitchen, Dad in his recliner, Sully on the couch with Colette, Waverly cross-legged on the floor looking at her phone. It was like walking into a painting that hadn't changed since I was 12. My mom hugged me and said, you look thin, are you eating? My dad said, hey there, Leo. Sully nodded. Waverly said, hey, without looking up. I stood in the living room. The gallery wall was still there. 23 photos. 0 of me. I looked at it one more time and felt something settle in my chest. Not anger. Not sadness. Resolve. I said I need to talk to everyone. Can we sit down? My mom looked confused. Sully looked mildly annoyed, like I was interrupting a lazy Saturday. My dad muted the television, which was probably the most dramatic gesture he'd made in a decade. Waverly finally looked up from her phone. I sat down in the chair across from all of them. I could feel my heart beating in my ears. My palms were damp, but my voice, when it came, was steady. I said, there's something I need to say to all of you, and I need you to let me finish before anyone responds. Can you do that? They all nodded, looking somewhere between curious and uncomfortable. I took a breath, and I started talking. I started with the wall. I pointed at it and said there are 23 photos on that wall. I'm not in a single one. And when I noticed that last time I was here, Mom, you changed the subject and asked if I wanted coffee. Nobody in this room has ever acknowledged what that wall says about how this family sees me. So I'm acknowledging it right now. I don't exist in this family's story, and I need you all to know that I've noticed. My mom's face did something complicated. She looked at the wall, then at me, then at the wall again, like she was seeing it for the first time. Which, in a way, she probably was. She opened her mouth, but I held up my hand. I said, I'm not done. This isn't about the wall. The wall is just the most recent thing. This is about a lifetime. I looked at my dad. Dad, you taught Sully to drive in your truck. You took him fishing every summer. You spent hours in the garage with him building things. When it was my turn, you told me to sign up for driver's edition. You never took me fishing, and I was the one who actually liked building things. I'm a structural engineer, Dad. I literally build things for a living. Did you ever once think about that? My dad's jaw tightened. He didn't say anything. He just stared at the coffee table like it owed him an apology. I turned to my mom. Mom, you went to every one of Sully's baseball games. Every single one. I had band concerts. You missed all but 2, and one of those you left early. Waverly got a surprise Sweet 16. I got a gift card. You didn't call me on my birthday this year. You texted me at 9:47 at night because you saw it on Facebook. I'm your son. You forgot my birthday. My mom's eyes were filling up. She said, Leo, that's not fair. I've always loved you the same. And I said, Mom, I believe you think that. I really do. But love without attention isn't love. It's just a word. I looked at Sully. You didn't put me in your wedding party. Your own brother. You had 4 groomsmen, and one of them was cousin Declan, who you see once a year at Thanksgiving. When I asked about it, you said I wasn't a spotlight kind of guy. That's not a reason, Sully. That's an excuse. And it hurt. Sully shifted on the couch. Colette put her hand on his arm. He said, I didn't think you'd care, man. You never seem to care about stuff like that. And I said, yeah, because I learned very early that caring about things in this family got me nowhere. So I stopped showing it. That doesn't mean I stopped feeling it. Then I looked at Waverly. When you called me about your birthday party, you said I was making everything about myself. Do you remember that? She nodded, looking uncomfortable. I said, Waverly, I asked you when my birthday was, and you didn't know. You guessed October. It's August 14th. I've known your birthday since I was 4 years old. You're 26, and you can't tell me what month mine is in. And you told me I was the selfish one. Waverly's lip trembled. She said, I didn't mean it like that, Leo. I said, I know you didn't mean to be cruel. But that's almost worse. You weren't trying to hurt me. You just genuinely hadn't thought about me enough to know better. That's the whole problem. The room was silent. My mom was crying quietly. My dad was still staring at the coffee table. Sully was rubbing the back of his neck. Waverly was blinking fast. I said, I didn't come here to make you feel bad. I came here because Dad called me 2 weeks ago and asked me for $40,000. And I realized that the only time anyone in this family reaches out to me is when they need something. Not because they miss me. Not because they want to know how I'm doing. Because I'm useful. And I'm done being useful to people who don't see me. My dad finally spoke. He said, so you're not going to help us with the house. And I swear, I almost laughed. Because even in this moment, after everything I'd just said, his first response was about the money. I said, Dad, did you hear anything I just said? He blinked and said, of course I did. I said, then your first question shouldn't be about a check. My mom jumped in, her voice cracking. She said, Leo, we love you. You're our son. I don't understand where all this is coming from. And I said, it's coming from 29 years, Mom. It's coming from a lifetime of being overlooked and a wall full of evidence that you didn't even realize was evidence. I don't doubt that you love me in some abstract way. But abstract love doesn't show up. It doesn't call. It doesn't hang your picture on the wall. Sully leaned forward and said, okay, so what do you want? What's the play here? You want us to apologize? And I said, honestly, Sully, I don't know if an apology would change anything right now. What I want is for you to understand why I've been distant. It's not because I'm antisocial or weird or difficult. It's because being around this family makes me feel invisible. And I decided I'd rather be alone and seen by the people who actually look at me than surrounded by family who look right through me. Waverly was full-on crying now. She said, "Leo, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I should have known your birthday. I should have called you more." And I appreciated that. Of everyone in the room, Waverly was the first to actually apologize without a qualifier. No, I didn't mean to. Just I'm sorry. I said, "Thank you, Waverly. I mean that." Then I stood up. I said, "I'm not cutting anyone off. I'm not making any dramatic declarations. But I am telling you that the dynamic we've had for my entire life is over. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be a real one. That means calling me, asking about my life, including me, not just when you need money or a head count at a party. If that's something you're willing to do, I'm open to it. If it's not, then I think we all know where we stand." Nobody said anything for a long moment. My mom got up and hugged me and sobbed into my shoulder for what felt like 5 minutes. My dad stayed in his chair, but he looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "I didn't know, Leo. I didn't know it was that bad." And for the first time in my life, I believed that he believed that. He genuinely didn't know, because he'd never bothered to pay attention. I left that afternoon. I didn't stay for dinner. I wasn't ready for that yet. The drive back was quiet, but different from the last time. I didn't feel empty. I felt lighter, like I'd set down a suitcase I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. That was 4 months ago. Here's what's happened since. Waverly calls me every other week now. She asks about work, about Jolene. She sent Biscuit a catnip toy for no reason. We're not close yet, but we're closer than we've ever been. Sully sent me a long text about a month later. Not eloquent, that's not his thing. But he said I was right, and he was sorry about the wedding. Said if he and Colette ever renewed their vows, I'd be standing next to him. We talk occasionally now. It's awkward, but it's real. My mom calls every Sunday. She remembered my birthday this year and called at 8 in the morning, not 9:47 at night. She took down the gallery wall and is redoing it. She sent me a photo of the new wall in progress. There are 3 pictures of me already. My dad is still my dad. He's not turning into a Hallmark movie. But a few weeks ago I got a package. Inside was a set of drafting pencils, expensive ones, the kind structural engineers use. The note in his handwriting said I should have paid more attention. These are for the guy who builds things. I keep those pencils in my desk drawer at work. I didn't give them the money for the condo. They figured it out on their own, which they were always capable of. As for me, I'm good. I'm better than good. The campus project was completed last month and it won a regional design award. Pernilla put my name first on the submission. Jolene and I adopted a second cat, a scruffy orange thing named Crouton, who terrorizes Biscuit and sleeps on my face. Emmett and Sloan are coming to visit next month. Big Frank sent me another bottle of whiskey to celebrate the award, with a note that just said that's my boy. I spent 29 years being invisible to the people who were supposed to see me first. I wasted a lot of time waiting for them to turn around. But here's what I know now. You can't make someone look at you. You can only decide to stop standing in a room where nobody's looking. And once you walk into a room where people actually see you, where they know your name and your birthday and the things you've built and the things you're building, you realize the old room was never where you belonged. My name is Leo. I'm 29. I build things for a living. And for the first time in my life, the thing I'm most proud of building is a life where I'm not invisible anymore.